Sounds good. 3, 2, 1. Here we are. Welcome, everybody, and Merry Christmas Eve. We're here with Dr. Jim and special guest. This is going to be weird, Levi. And I say it's going to be weird because he's literally sitting across the table from me. So if you see me looking this way, it's because I'm looking at him in person. But I'll try and focus here. We're here for a live jam sesh. It's Freaky Friday. We couldn't let the people down even on this special holiday, Christmas Eve. So thank you for joining us. Levi is with us for the holidays. He was exiled from civil society, so we took him into our home. He had nowhere else to go.
I do appreciate that, by the way.
Yeah. So he's here. Dr. Jim, how are you? Merry Christmas Eve.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Merry Christmas to you too.
Yeah. So what's happening and shaking since yesterday?
Just had a great workout this morning and caught up on my sleep last night because I got up at 3:30 the day before, right, to get my kids to the airport. And so caught up on my sleep last night and had a great workout this morning and just Christmas prepping now for the rest of the day. Right?
Yeah, appreciate you squeezing it in. We've got about an hour here, and then we'll be having some festivities. So you'll see we're actually in my dining room right now.
Yeah, it's a new location.
The change of location here. So, gentle listeners, if you were, this is Christmas Eve. I know it's a weird time. Can you hear that? That's my Saint Bernard walking around. Can you hear that obnoxious?
Your much beloved Saint Bernard.
That's a lull. If anybody hears that, really that is a Saint Bernard.
The Saint Bernard your wife just simply could not live without.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's what it was. Yeah. I'll reserve those comments. So Levi, first time on the podcast, my friend. I've actually been trying to drag Levi on the podcast for a while, and he's consistently said no, but he finally just did a podcast that wasn't mine.
Yeah, the thing was, I felt guilty. Somebody else had reached out to me, and I said yes within a couple of hours. I know you've been working on me for a couple of years, and I realized after that I had set the precedent. So now, whenever you ask me, I knew that I needed to get on. So here I am, regrettably, but I'm very excited. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. Good to have you, man. Levi is a Catholic convert, similar to myself. So he's got a background of. What were you?
I started out as evangelical.
Okay.
So kind of grew up in what we called it a community covenant church. So it was a branch off of the Universal Evangelical Church, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now he's Marin's godfather. So that's where we're at.
Doing my best.
All right. Should we take some questions, gentlemen? Let's see what we've got here. Oh, I see some good ones already.
That is our way on Freaky Friday.
Yeah. This is let's get freaky, guys. Start sending in your questions. Merry Christmas. Thank you for the Merry Christmases, guys. Appreciate it. Here's a good one from Brendan. He says, I've begun thinking about my kids. I got one who is one, and hopefully we can have a bunch more. But what do you guys do to teach your kids the faith in a way that won't make them rebel against it? Yeah, well, Jim, I feel like you should go first because yours are more of a finished product than mine.
Yeah.
But I've got a few thoughts on this.
Yeah. I didn't go out of my way to do this, right? I mean, I didn't have a strategy of how to keep my kids, from rebelling against the faith at all, right? We just practiced the faith in the home. Right. And
you weren't a deadbeat dad.
Yeah.
Which statistically seems to make a huge difference.
Makes a huge difference about it. Right. And, I think, one, whether this is one thing you have to understand with your children is you are not actually running this. You can guarantee no outcome whatsoever with your kids. Right. You can maybe flip some probabilities. Right. But that's it. And so, if you're going into your parenting thinking, I need to guarantee that they are practicing the faith when they come out of it, you're on a fool's errand, right? Okay. Ultimately the enemy will get a vote here, right? Your kids will get a vote in this, how everything goes, right? And so I don't think you can approach it as saying, I'm trying to program them like I'm trying to program a machine, right? I think all you can do is, one, not be a hypocrite. Right? I think that probably makes a huge difference. Mm-hmm. Two, you just make you don't, I don't think you go out of your way to point out to your kids, we're doing the right Catholic thing now. We're doing the right Catholic thing now, right? Because you're constantly you're taking it out of its environment and looking at it like an insect in a jar, and you're not actually just being in it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think you have to just make these practices part of your daily life and bring your kids along with them. And And, you know, you don't be a hypocrite. You let them see you as a decent model. Don't be a deadbeat, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's all you can do, right?
Yeah.
That's all you can do. And I think this is one where trying to force it is going to make that worse. It's going to make it worse, right?
Yeah. A few thoughts. My kids are young, but you guys have both met my kids, so
Right.
kind of see where they're at. Good kids, really good kids. Helps to have good godparents. That's important too. But I mean, like we know, right, statistically, and it's pretty alarming, the role that the father has in this,
Yep.
right? And if the father is a good father, a loving father, but you know, one that still instills discipline, but shows up, is not a hypocrite, and is devout and practicing, the probabilities are like somewhere between 80 to 90%, it looks like, that the kids will continue on. So like Jim said, you can flip some probabilities, but if the general surveys and research on this is correct, and in my sort of anecdotal range, it seems to be, right?
Mhm.
It's the devoutness and the consistency of the father that seems to make the biggest probability flips, right? Because I think it's something like, almost the exact opposite, right? If the dad isn't devout, isn't practicing, but even if the mom is, or the dad's a hypocrite, or he's a deadbeat, or he's abusive, or something like that, then it's something like 80 to 90% chance they won't continue.
Right.
Have you looked at this recently?
Yeah, I forget what the statistic is, but you're definitely spot on as far as the sentiment goes.
This was a long time ago. And you know, I read a study once. Okay. But I remember reading something that it was a piece of social science claiming that pretty much what your worldview is by the time you reach like 15 years old, right? That's probably going to stick for the rest of your life. Right. And there's, you know, people will like fall away from that, but as soon as they get to like the point where life gets serious, they tend to fall back into it. Right. And I think this is also like in my point I'm making here is like, you can't make like you're somehow, if I can just get my kids to be like, you know, practicing Catholics by their 18th birthday, that's it. Like we've crossed the goal line.
I just got to get them to confirmation.
I got to get confirmation. Right. And if they're like, look, I was not confirmed in high school. I didn't want to do it. Didn't do it. Right. Okay. I get married and suddenly there's babies on the way. And I'm like, holy crap, I have to teach these people how to live. Suddenly I'm interested in the faith again. Right. And this is by design. This is how it's supposed to work, right? This is how it's supposed to work. Okay. And so, you know, if you just get your young people formed, right? And if they, you know, quote unquote, go off rails and stuff like that, and they're you know, they fall away in their teens or 20s, lighten up. This is kind of the structure of human life here. Like, don't go to war and like ruin the relationship with them and stuff like that. If you've laid that foundation, that's all you can do, right? It's all you can do. And there's some good chance, right, that once they get to a point in their life where they need to take themselves and their life seriously and other people seriously, their spouse, their children, that they're going to come back to it, right? It's hard to take life seriously when you're 17 years old and all your possibilities are before you, or you're 20 years old and all your possibilities are before you. But when those possibilities starts to close down and you've got to like actually own something, right? Like in like the sense of authentically, you know, be something and like teach it and share it with the people and stuff like that. That's probably a game changer. It was for me. And I think that's, and there's some evidence like that's kind of the structure of how human life goes. Like, you know, you have a foundation, you go out and you experiment, and then probably when things get serious, you come back to it.
Yeah. Two other thoughts, and then we'll get Levi in here a bit. But I mean, two things that have been big for us are, living the Catholic life in a fully enchanted way. Jim, we've talked about this, right? Our life is just suffused with Catholicism. You can kind of see it through our house, right? Levi will tell you. But also, you know, our kids are still relatively young, but we're already starting to introduce them to the truly intellectual side of it, right? Forming them intellectually, and also the moral side and the beautiful side. I mean, you know, I guess I'm kind of a tough dad. I discipline a lot, but my kids really know how much I love them, and I spend so much time, and I constantly reinforce that, right? That I just like when they go like out and continue to experience the insanity of the world, I think they're just going to obviously see what the better option is, right? That's kind of my goal, right? To make it just so obvious, right? It's like, okay, what I grew up with versus what the alternatives are. I just want it to be so obvious to them what the good one is, or what the better one is, right? And so that's been kind of my goal. Yeah, Levi.
Yeah, and there really is a difference between the parents that overparent, and we've all seen cases of this. I think back to a lot of my evangelical friends who grew up. One set of them was the kids of a Protestant pastor, and the dad was so overbearing. He had so many strictures that it was the kids did want to rebel. But I remember distinctly going and grabbing dinner with you, Pat, a couple of years ago, and we went out to Alva out in Malvern, and we took your son along, Roan, and he was I forget how young at the time, but he was the most well-behaved child that I could remember being around out in public. He was polite to people. He sat patiently. He would ask, if he wanted to jump into the conversation because we were getting into some deeper things. He would ask politely if he could jump in, and it was very impressive to see, what it does look like when kids have been appropriately disciplined, not over disciplined. I mean, he wasn't trying to rebel, and he's
formed a personality, right?
He had a personality of his own, and he knew that it was good, and everybody around him knew that it was good as well. And it really is a beautiful thing to see that.
Well, thank you. We'll bring him down here. He's upstairs. I'll bring him down and introduce Road to the podcast.
I mean,
here.
Really.
He's going off the rails now. So yeah.
Something that Pat, you mentioned, like you're introducing your kids to the intellectual side of the faith, right? And that's very important to do that. But also, your kids are probably very bright. Okay, just given the genetic situation, right? Okay. And I think it's important to know, and this is the thing that worries me is, for the vast majority of, Christian believers who have ever lived, right? The faith was not passed on to them intellectually, right? Okay. And it's not clear that everybody is capable of that. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me clarify, because that's a really important point. I don't mean that I'm trying to download Aquinas into their brains, right? What I mean is I don't want them to have cartoon theology that has caused so many other people to leave the faith, right? Exactly. So when I say the intellectual side, I mean just giving them the faith proper, the faith. Right?
But see, but I guess, and once again, I think in your case where you have children you're homeschooling, they're probably got a genetic leg up. Okay. That's a different case, but the vast majority of people, they're probably not capable of that. Okay. Or they don't have the educational, infrastructure available to them to do that. Right. Yeah. And what worries me is because for mostly what has passed on belief throughout history, whatever the religion, right, has been basically a certain kind of civil society, right?
Structure.
That this is just what structured daily life. This is what structured the calendar. Not all days were the same days. Some days are enchanted, some days are not. The way time was thought about, the way all the marking points of human life. Baptism, first confession, first communion, marriage, all these things. These were the guideposts of life. People weren't making rational decisions to become Catholics, nor were they making rational decisions about how to keep their kids Catholics. Right? They were just simply being in the world that they've accepted. Right. And this seems to be mostly the human way of doing things. Okay. Is that, we're first and foremost exceptionally good conformers. We're exceptionally good learners. Right. And only it's an anomaly that we're critical thinkers. Right. And I'm all for reason, but that's not how life has been passed on through the generations. Okay. And what we're doing, and I think for the most people, in order for these things to be passed on, it requires that cultural infrastructure to do it. Right?
Certainly.
And we have destroyed it. We've absolutely destroyed it, and we're continuing to destroy it. And we are doing more demolition work every second of every day on this. Right. And that's why I worry about this, not necessarily for my children. My children have grown up in a very happily enchanted place and in a home, in a very different kind of home. But I worried culturally that we have wrecked the very cognitive conditions that are necessary for human beings to understand anything. Right.
Yeah.
Except for the exceptional 10% who are Plato's philosopher. Right.
Right. Yeah. Because we have, well, here's the good news, gentle listeners. Dr. Jim, Levi, and myself, we have a plan to remedy this that we are currently formulating to get these structures back in place for all of society. So stay tuned. It will be happening soon here.
Stay tuned. But this is the thing we've had on the show before. You if you're worried about like how are your kids going to like keep the faith or just keep some kind of traditional worldview, you are going to have to get up and do something to make it so that there is an actual social world supportive of those things available to them.
A polis, as
A
some might
polis,
say.
as it were, yeah, as it were, right? That is what has to happen, right?
Yeah, good stuff. Let me highlight this. Levi, any further thoughts on that? No children yet, but definitely thinking,
I don't
possibly
have
in
any
the future, right?
children yet, but I think it is obvious from outsiders, what works well with parenting to some degree and what doesn't.
Mhm.
And I think that the same principle applies with children as with adults, and it's seeing something that is authentic.
Yeah.
To see the parents actually living out their faith is attractive, and kids want to emulate the good things that they see in their parents, and they want to reject the things that they see that are bad. And you see a lot of kids rejecting, I think, the overbearing parent because it's very clearly overbearing and it's not good. But when you see your parent offering good discipline that actually improves your life, you start to pick that up over time. You may not know it when you're a kid right away, but as time goes on, I think a lot of kids go back to the way that their parents were because they saw something that was good there. If they never saw an example of goodness and all that you show them is badness, then they tend to emulate that as well because that's all that they know.
Yeah. Let me
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, I got a relevant comment here, but
Sure.
go ahead.
No, go for it, dude. Go for it.
I was just going to say that Colin's just commenting here, and I want to highlight this. He says, "My experience as Jim's being a father forces you to face maturity in many things very quickly, religious or otherwise." Well, let me say this.
Yeah.
It forces you to make a choice one way or otherwise. I became a father when I was not religious, when I was in many ways still very vicious and immature. Fortunately, I think it did make me become a lot more mature. But I think you can't stay where you are when you become a parent, right? Especially if you weren't preparing for it. You either have to become a better person or a much worse person, right?
Yeah.
You either have to become a much
the stakes
more
are higher now.
selfish.
The stakes are higher.
The stakes are higher, right? And I think that is, and by God's grace, I think it did help me to become, broke up a lot of my narcissism and egoism and really stop being so self-centered. But I could have gone the other way. I could have packed up and be like, I didn't sign up for this,
Yep.
And that would have been, of course, extremely cowardly.
Yep.
But
even if it doesn't mean like literally leaving, it couldn't mean I'm just going to half-ass it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, religion came later for me, but becoming a father, I think, things, it will force you one way or another. Things cannot be the same. You'll become more virtuous or more vicious. Right.
Yeah. 100%. So I don't think I had a conversation about religion at any point in my life with my dad. Right. But my dad was a practicing Catholic his entire life. Right. I never remember him missing mass, right, on a Sunday, right? I remember my dad and Father Dan Dwayne of Holy Rosary Parish in Kewanee, Wisconsin, standing outside the church smoking Marlboros before mass, and then killing a 6-pack around the grill after on Sunday afternoon in the summers, right? You know what I mean? I remember my parents.
We miss the old neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember my parents doing marriage prep classes, with young couples at the parish, right? I remember, my father moved our family, right, like so that we could go to a Catholic high school, right? Like we moved so we could do it, and he was a postal worker, right? And so there wasn't a lot of like this cost him, a lot, right?
His actions were speaking.
His actions spoke, right? It was very clear. It was a priority to him that we would have a Catholic education, right? And I know it was immensely important to him in Vietnam, all those things. Okay. So but it had nothing to do with, like him sitting down and like doing good apologetics with me. It was him giving me an example of what a lived life looks like and being a good dad. And just, that was part of the package. And then when it came my turn, right. Faith of your fathers, man. Faith of your fathers.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Here, let's do a fun one, then we'll turn to more serious questions. Favorite Christmas music? I've got an album I'm loving right now, and I'm biased guitar player, but Paul Gilbert, one of my favorite guitarists, came out with his Christmas album. So it's all guitar music, but he's doing the standards, and he's just an amazing player. So check out Paul Gilbert's "Twas," TWAS. Levi, you're going to be hearing that in the car later today for sure. How about you guys?
Go for it, Levi.
All right, Pat. my favorite Christmas song of all time is "Mary, Did You Know?"
Did you?
just joking. Gosh, I'm so bad with music. I probably can't offer anything that's actually serious here, but I will say that I love going into mass and listening to some of the organ music that they play over Christmas. There's something about it that just lifts the soul.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Jim, is it Twisted Sister's Christmas album for you?
Well, I mean, honestly, okay. The first thing that came to my head was Father Christmas by the Kinks. right.
You know, Rob Halford from Judas Priest has a pretty nutty Christmas album.
Does he really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll say this because like growing up like kind of a Rust Belt blue collar kid, like that song really resonated with me, right? Father Christmas by the Kinks.
Hey man, if it's your favorite, right?
Yeah. And but I like a lot of the like your classic English choral stuff, right? Like King Wenceslas, right? Holly and the Ivy, that stuff. I like a lot of the very classic English choral stuff.
Yeah, cool. All right, I'm kind of going out of order here, but we got some fun questions. Let's take a fitness one, then we'll circle back to philosophy and theology. Vincent says, "I'm greedy. Can you jam on learning BJJ as learning a language? As a white belt, I feel like I'm learning words but cannot speak sentences even, let alone have good conversations." Yeah, I like the analogy here, right? Because it is martial arts in many ways it is a language. You become fluent. You can converse with people as you roll, right? Like you really can. So Jim, what are your thoughts?
You know, I'll hear people use this analogy of learning BJJ as a language. And I 100% agree with it. But then they go on to show how deeply they misunderstand how language works and how it's learned, right? Okay. And so like you don't learn a language by learning a vocabulary. Like you don't learn a language, right? By learning a grammatical structure. You don't really learn we torture children with teaching them languages this way, right? But the results of that are not great. Okay, like you learn a language by immersion in it, right? Well, we know this. Okay, so two things we know: you learn your first language,
dude. I mean, that's our friend Eduardo, who's just on the show. The dude speaks 10 languages, and how does he do it? He literally moves to those. He just immerses himself. Right?
And I'll guarantee you, it involves making friends with people there.
It does. So
we know there's a deep connection between emotional attachment and language acquisition. Okay, and moreover, you have to be in the environment to do it. Okay, so I think the analogy between BJJ and language goes at the level in that it is a way of practically dealing with the world that reveals truths about the world that cannot be accessed but by learning this skill, right? Okay, and like a language, though, it is only learned ultimately by immersion in it, and I'm going to go and say emotional attachment. Like it is the community life in the jiu-jitsu gym, right? That's going to bond you to the language of jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, I think that's very important. The same way it was the community life in your home growing up that taught you language in the first place. Yeah.
Excellent. Nothing to add there.
Right.
I'm satisfied with that response. Levi?
Yeah.
Happy with that?
That was perfect.
Can we move on? Thank you, doctor. Here's a spicy one. We cover a lot of controversial topics on the podcast, but this one always triggers people when they hear my response to it. Thoughts on speaking about Santa Claus to kids? I have Catholic friends who disavow it all and even say that they wouldn't care if their kids told other kids that Santa wasn't real. Let me say our policy. We don't do Santa with the kids, and I've got a couple of reasons for that. One is it's just not what Christmas is about, right? To my mind. Second is like, we can have the greater debate about whether it counts as a lie. But I hold honesty and directness and truthfulness of my kids at an extremely that is so critically important to me. And there are people I know who were traumatized when they found out Santa wasn't real. And then they started wondering, are they lying about the God stuff too? Right. So to me, it's like, and by the way, I came to this position before I was Catholic, before I was religious. Right before all this, Christine and I were pretty set on just not doing the Santa thing because we didn't see a point in just having our kids believe and sincerely believe in something that just wasn't true and it just didn't seem meaningful anyways. And we stuck to that. We do not, send our kids out to spoil Santa for other kids. We don't do that. Our policy is look, if other kids start talking about it, let them do their thing, right? And I think there was only one time where they accidentally it happened, right?
Let
It was
on
with
to the
Sam's.
neighbors.
It was with Sam's kids
Oh,
actually,
no.
and it was fine because Sam
Yeah.
essentially ended up agreeing with us anyways, and he really didn't want to do the Santa thing. So it was actually kind of worked out in the end. But that's where we're at. We don't do the Santa crap. I don't know. What do you guys can chime in?
I mean, kids live in kind of an imaginary world, so the things that are true for them are true for them in a kid kind of way. You know, a kid can think that he's a penguin and run around believing he's a penguin, and you can say, "Oh, you're a penguin," you know. And I'm not sure that it really quantifies as a lie in that sense, because they don't really the boundary between truth and falsehood there is, I think, a little bit different. So I personally I feel like you can stretch the Santa thing into that realm, but to the extent that,
But I mean, how many parents do that, right? Because a lot of parents I know with the Santa thing are like, they bank on their belief being sincere, because then Santa becomes a carrot and stick. You see what I'm saying? Right? Like, Santa's not coming this year, right? All the time.
Yeah,
that was used on me, man, right? And
yeah, and
like,
that's very real,
right.
Yeah. No presents. Yeah.
So we actually had a hilarious 180 policy flip on this in our house, right? So initially, for reasons similar to Pat, we were like, no, we're not gonna do Santa, not gonna do Santa. And I think I might even have told well, first of all, my I have to be careful telling stories about my kids on the internet, but my oldest son, and if you knew who this guy turned out to be, it's absolutely hilarious. But he thought it was Santa Claus, not Santa Claus. And I remember the first time somebody asked him if he wanted to go and sit on Santa Claus's lap. He freaked out. I don't want to go by Santa Claus, right? And anyway, so so we were anti Santa for similar reasons, because it's lying and all that. And then it had weighed on me to a point that this was it really cost our parents a lot. Okay. It cost them and it started to weigh on me that this was a rejection of a very central cultural tradition that I had grown up with, right? That was important to my parents, right? And it seemed to me that this was, and if it's evil, it's evil, but this was my attempting to operate freely of much of the context that I had grown up with. You can see how this connects to other things.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so, and it's like it or not, this is the culture that I live in, right? This is the language we speak about Christmas, right? And so we did a 180, we did there was like Santa's band, and then just one Christmas we just started talking about Santa, right? We never sat them down and said there is a Santa Claus, and I never answered a yes or no question about Santa Claus ever, right? Okay. And so in the same way, I think this is what you were going with, Eli, is, the way I've always explained is I never if we're playing, characters from Harry Potter or something, right? I never sit down and say, no, that's not true, right? There's no Voldemort, to be clear, right? Okay. You know what I mean? It's it's a game we're playing,
right?
They don't care if it's true or not. It's fun, right? And so for us, Santa was just a game we played around Christmas. It was like a role-playing game we played around Christmas. We never used it like a carrot and a stick, right? Except when it was a wink, wink, nod, nod, when they were old enough to know this was, that they had stepped out of the fantasy, right? And I do think it's very important that children can live in a fantasy world to a high degree, that they can live in an enchanted reality to a high degree. But once again, I would never sit down and say to the kid, this is real. Right.
Okay. And if you don't knock it off, he's not coming.
Santa's going to get you, because it's going to give you a warped view about religion, and then it's all the rug's going to be pulled off from you. You're going to have doubts, right? But for us, it was, hey, this is the cultural milieu we live in. This is actually fun. It's constructive. It's enchantment. And so, hey, I don't feel
that
there's no
certainly
Spider-Man
seems
either.
like there's some reasonable room there, right? As the game.
And we never had to undo it. All of them, by the time they were 8, 9, had they were winking, nodding when they're playing the game in front of the other kids, right? And so in front of the younger. So and so that's how we came to that kind of immediate position. And also like the lack of Santa was like, it was kind of ruining Christmas for our parents too, you know? And so I think you do have
we
to be careful
didn't
how
have
much
that.
violence you're doing to like the people that you owe something significant to, right?
Right. Yeah. We fortunately didn't have that issue. But good. All right, let's keep moving. Parker says, Merry Christmas. What are some of your guys' favorite philosophers and theologians that are not well known by most people?
Yeah, who's most people, right?
But I mean, like most people probably have heard of Aristotle, even if they're not that into philosophy, right? But I mean, Bernard Lonergan, right? For me, he's the dude that I can't speak highly enough about, both in terms of philosophy and theology. I mean, his work in epistemology is just, I think, incredible. I think the man was clearly a genius, and his work in theology is also incredible. I mean, like Lonergan handles the toughest stuff really well. You know, Trinity. I mean, you name it, simplicity, all that stuff. So he'd be probably my number one. What about you guys?
I mean, Merleau-Ponty, I think, is at least like in the Catholic world, this like deeply underappreciated figure, right? So that's probably my. But I mean, like in the phenomenological world, he's a major figure. So yeah, it once again like who not known by whom, right?
First one that comes to mind for me is Father Spitzer. He's a brilliant theologian and philosopher, and has come up with just a lot of really interesting insights. He's one of those guys that can sit down and you can ask him anything, and he's got an answer to everything, and it's a pretty profound answer.
Yeah, he's got some really good stuff on suffering. He's also got some really good stuff on the church and epistemology, Jim, which you would probably dig. Yeah, he's a good Jim. I just fortuitously have Planiga right here, so maybe he deserves a plug too. But again, like he's a philosopher's philosopher. All like, you know, you're in this, you know, Planiga if you're in you know those circles, but I can't imagine the average person on the street has probably ever heard of him.
Yeah, in terms of people who are alive today, I would go Alexander Dugan, right? But that might get this video like banned now. But
you gotta be careful.
Be careful.
Yeah, there's so many good ones.
But yeah, Planiga's not a theologian though. Technically, he dips into theology like most Christian philosophers do. But
man, if you're diving into some of the topology stuff, Brent Petrie's got a lot of good stuff. I guess you'd consider him more of a theologian, or
him and Michael Barber. They're some of their work together is really good.
Gary Machuda's done a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm sticking with Bernard Lonergan though. He's my dude. What's key? Jim, if anything is, or Levi, if you guys see any questions that pique your interest, go. I'm not going in a particular order here. Ishmam says, so here's a question. Can we use the ought implies can principle in proving God's existence? Eugen Nagasawa uses it. Yeah, Eugen's an interesting thinker. I think he's currently an editor of religious studies, and recently been going through his book on the maximal God hypothesis. But Jim, this kind of relates to a conversation we had not too long ago. What are your thoughts?
I don't know exactly how. Well, I mean, I guess if we're going, I mean, I guess if what we're referring to here is Kant's argument, you know, for God as a postulate of practical reason from the Second Critique, but that's a very big place, right? Okay. You know, so basically what Kant will argue is that there's no way, like there's no way we can have an obligation that we cannot fulfill, right? Doesn't make sense. Ought implies can. And he doesn't think it's possible to really fully fulfill our obligations to the moral law, right? In a finite life. And he also thinks it's impossible to guarantee that our fulfilling of those obligations in our finite life would actually lead us to happiness, right? And he thinks it doesn't make a lot of sense ultimately that you could be obligated to make yourself unhappy, right? And so for Kant then, since ought implies can, it must be possible that we could fulfill our obligations and we could end up being happy in doing it. Ergo, you need an infinite creator that provides an afterlife from it. Okay. Now, so yes, can we use it? Well, it's obviously this has been done by Kant, and there's a long debate about that.
But right? does it give us a demonstration, right?
Yeah, I mean, on Kant's terms, I mean, he thinks it's full on. You can, in as much as the word ought makes any sense, he thinks this all just falls out, right? This all is rationally entailed by it. Yeah. But I mean, once again, like there's, we've got 200 years of literature on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see here. We're going to try and maybe speed up a little bit here, guys, because we are on a time limit. Catholic base says, should Catholics use ontological arguments? I struggle seeing how it could lead to DS as divine simplicity as obviously as traditional arguments. Are we forced to just make some additional moves? Yes, I mean, use them in what sense? Like, what are you trying to use them? Right. Use them for, right? And do you think I guess the difference is like, do you think there's an independently sound ontological argument? Is I guess the first question, right? I've got mixed thoughts on this. I'm intrigued by some of the newer versions of these of the modal ontological arguments. The argument is essentially this: possibly God exists, therefore God exists. That's the argument, right? And there's a system of logic that will give you that entailment if you grant that first premise, the possibility premise, right? And then the debate really comes down to that possibility premise and seeing if you can kind of break a stalemate between that and God's impossibility, right? And that's where the debate is. Now, it's funny that Eugen was brought up because he thinks he can short circuit this and get the ontological argument to run by positing the maximal God hypothesis, which is God is the maximally consistent set of knowledge, power, and goodness. I'm not fully convinced by his project, though. I'm intrigued by it, but I'm not fully convinced by it. My position currently, and this is something I'm willing to have my mind changed on if this has not been an area of specialization for me either. So let me just say that I think that you break the possibility premise by demonstrating the actuality of God, right, with a cosmological argument or other arguments. But then what the ontological argument can do is it can give you, as we've talked about on other podcasts, a way to show that theism can really bring brute facts down to zero. And I think that is really useful. So even if you can't run it independently, I think it still serves useful philosophical and theological purposes in conjunction with other considerations. And I think it's just a wonderful thing to sort of entertain as an intellectual exercise, even though I don't know. I feel like I changed my mind on this like every other, had a very kind of mixed relationship with ontological arguments. How about you, good doctor? And Levi, have you taken a peek at these at all?
Yeah, I have a similar, multi-decade tormented relationship with ontological arguments. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna not comment on this one lest I get way over my head.
Mm-hmm. I would commend. People who are kind of at the edge of this stuff right now, Bruce, Rasmussen, Eugen, if you guys want to see some cool and interesting moves, check those guys out, because a number of them seem like they think that they can make this thing run. But as far as like, what would you use it for, right? Well, I gave one use that I think is a useful thing, but it's not an independent use. Do I think that this is something that is like apologetically useful for like you're sitting next to some dude on the bus who's a religious skeptic and like, oh, let me tell you about the history between Anselm and Plantinga of ontological arguments. Can't imagine that it would.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of other easier ones. What do you think is one of the easier arguments to get into?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's so so if you were to ask me like a conversation with somebody on the street, right, about like, and they just sincerely ask me, hey, you were an atheist, now why you're a theist and why you're a Catholic, I think that the easiest kind of street level answer I would give is just like, look, I think that God makes the best sense of the widest range of human experience, from the fact that there's something rather than nothing, to the orderly structure of the universe, to our moral experience, to our ability to reason, to continued existence, right? To miracle claims, to spiritual experiences, apparitions. And to me, it seems like theism is a really satisfying, unifying, and simple explanation of all that. And I don't see a comparable alternative. Would be like to get the conversation going, you know. And I think for people in the street in general, I'm curious your thoughts is, the way our culture is now, they're just even surprised that you've even thought about it, right?
Yeah,
They're just even surprised that you've
yeah.
even thought about it, like that you even have any reason at all. And like, I didn't even go into any arguments there. I just listed some things, right, that I think fit well.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that often does something for people. Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit earlier about being just a good example, for your kids, and they can see that there's something good in you. But the only reason they can see that there's something good in you is because you're walking down the right path, and you have to know that you're walking down the right path, which means that at some point you have to reason through it. And if your parents didn't raise you to be Catholic, to believe in God, to have whatever the virtues are that you esteem to, or that exist in the world, then you have to find your way there. And you don't necessarily know if you are on that path to start with. So you've got to dive into some of these arguments. You've got to use reason to understand the world. And if you haven't already got in your head whether you're sure that there is a God or that there isn't a God, then that's a really good place to start. Because if you don't understand that, all of the other things in life become kind of confusing as to why you would even care.
Right. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I'm skeptical about the role of natural theology and apologetics in general, because I just don't. It presumes that just this is accessible to every single human being, right? And I can spend 15 weeks teaching first cause arguments in a college class, and at the end of the semester, the majority of the students are not really going to get it. They're always going to think it's the universe can't be infinitely old. And that's
right. Into the same mistakes.
Yeah. So I am skeptical on the role that natural theology can play in actually like bringing people in, right?
Yeah, I
might bring them in because it's an occasion for them to be in, and they wanted to be in it. They were looking for an excuse to change their life anyway. I mean, we give also psychological explanations on it, right?
Right.
Like giving them a rational credential for it, but they don't really understand it, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think where arguments play a role is for the person who has maybe a sincere intellectual barrier. Right. They're not like emotionally or for whatever reason, they don't have an animus against religion. In fact, they might even be attracted to it. Right. But they sincerely think, I think there's a tension here or a conflict, or it doesn't make sense. I think for that person, natural theology or apologetics can do some work. But for somebody who's committed come hell or high water for other reasons against theism or particular religion, I think I don't know. I don't think it.
Right. And once again, I'll show me the culture that primarily sustained itself through rational apologetics, right? When rational apologetics come up, it's because something has deeply gone wrong, right?
And I'll show you a leprechaun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, the arguments are not always for external apologetics. Sometimes they're just internal, is to understand deeply enough yourself that you have become convinced that you choose to live that life.
Yeah, I mean, arguments are tools, right? I mean, for me, like cosmological arguments are tools to really try and understand the fundamental foundation of things, right? So for me, studying that was a personal project, right? A quest. And it just so happened that it did happen to be useful and interesting to some other people, not all, but always. It was, sort of for me. That sounds selfish, but it's the truth, right? Good. Let's keep going here. Good questions, guys. Thanks for tuning in for Christmas Eve.
I saw one finish one I want to hit.
Let's do
John
it.
M.
Yeah.
How would you prioritize and periodize the training qualities for tier 1 operators? Okay, so I'll go with, well, first I'll say, look, if you're into that, go check out K Black's books, not my book in Tactical Barbell. Go get K Black's Tactical Barbell 1 and 2. Okay. And I think your best way of looking at that is in those 2 books. Okay. Secondly, though, K Black will tell you, if you're actually in the pipeline, right? Like you're actually have a recruiter and you're actually attempting to become an operator. Okay. Then you need to consult the people who are running that pipeline as to what are the priorities that I should be having here and how should I be training for them. Right. Because it depends on what's the job. There are different jobs. There are different senses of operator and all this. Okay. And like Kay Black himself will actually say, like when I was doing more like coaching for him, he said, if someone comes to you and they're saying, I'm getting ready, to go to Buds or something, be careful taking that as a client. Because he says like they should be working with the people, their recruiters, right, to get them there, right, and never ever like consult with them unless that this has all been run by that chain, right, and this is going to get them where they want to get. Okay, so I would say to John, if you're actually thinking about signing up and you're actually thinking about getting in that operator pipeline, right, then then you absolutely like need to make sure you're doing what those people tell you, and they will give you detailed programming. Tackle Barbell can help, but make sure you're doing what you're being told, right? This is a good habit if you have to in that world. If you're just looking like you're just like say signing up to go to boot camp for the Marine Corps or signing up to boot camp for the Army or something like that, look, you need to be able to run. You need to do a lot of calisthenics. You need to have like good aerobic conditioning, right? Just minimally, right? And there, just get Tactical Barbell 2 conditioning and start doing that. Yep.
Excellent. All right, I have to take this one because it's on music and guitar, and I hardly ever get to answer this, so I'm going to be indulgent here for a minute. But maybe we can tie it in. Yate says, "What's your tip in improving shredding on the guitar? Because I have trouble building speed." I think a couple of things. One is you got to make sure that you have good mechanics from the start. When I first started playing guitar, I used to hold the pick with multiple fingers. Creates too much tension in the hand. So good picking mechanics, loose grip, and relaxation is going to be key. I remember my guitar instructor would always say, never try and play as fast as you can. Only try and play 80 to 90% as fast as you can. Because if you try to play as fast as you can, you sort of automatically tense up, right? But if you say, okay, I'm only going to do 80 or 90%, it sort of keeps you relaxed. And then also you have to practice minimal movement, right? Like just getting your fingers used to moving the least distance possible, both off and on the string to increase speed. And then you to play fast, you have to play slow, man. So you have to put the metronome on. You have to do the drills, and you have to play it at a speed where it is so easy and you can stay so relaxed. And then you just have to incrementally put it up. And if you start getting too tense, you have to take it back until you can nail it when you're relaxed. And then you put it up again. If you start to get too tense, you got to put it back. And I think you should try and maybe practice around a speed or a range where you're more successful than not in most of your attempts. It's funny, it ties into something you're talking with Mike Matthews about in general, right? Like you don't want to be failing all of your attempts of all of your runs or all of your licks. But if you're constantly getting everyone perfect, it's probably a little too easy as well. So those would be my tips. Good mechanics, minimum effective movement, and you have to play very, very slow before you can start to play fast, and just be patient. And then realize like you're not Paul Gilbert. I'm not Paul Gilbert either. Some people are just mechanically, their structure will just go faster. And like I had to accept that truth. Just like I was never going to be an NBA player. Sometimes you're just not going to be as fast as other people. That's it.
That's true fact. Did you see that the Hebrew assassin has manifested himself in the?
I thought I smelled something funny cooking in the comments. There he is. Not a question, but an unassailably accurate statement. It would be way cooler if you had the Hebrew hammer on your AMA. Alex, dude, I'll send you a link. We only got a couple minutes left, but we get it.
So, Jesse Driscoll says, "Hey boys, I'm starting to work double 40-kilogram clean and press singles. Thanks for all of the motivation and help from your show." Jesse, you're the Ubermensch, man. That's awesome. Double 40 kg clean and press. No joke. Well done, man. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. All right.
Unless you tip the scale at 400, I'm really impressed, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see. There was one that I saw. I wanted to. Here's a mace question for you, Jim. Maybe you could take this one quick. Indian says, "Hello, gentlemen. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. My question is regarding mace bells. I can swing the 10 kilogram for 5 minutes unbroken. What should be his next step?"
Gosh, it depends what you mean by swinging it. But if you can go 5 minutes with something for unbroken, you can probably go a little heavier, right? So I would just look at a heavier mace, right? I mean, like I in working with clubs, I actually set as a goal to be able to swing, to do inside outside pendulums for 20 minutes unbroken, right? With a 20-pound club before moving up to attempt the 25 for that. I still do like some heavy stuff, but in the terms of that long-term swing, I made 20 minutes my goal, right? And just got it this morning, right?
I didn't think you guys are actually going to add me.
That's right.
I put a shirt on for this, so this better be good.
Yeah. Well, now I'm disappointed, man. I don't know.
As are all of the women folk.
The ladies. You know, now the ladies are all going to like turn off.
I love it. I didn't think you guys would actually invite me on.
I usually just troll because I'm like, this is, like I'm on YouTube. I see you guys are live. I'm like, all right, well, why not?
Yeah.
Oh man, Alex, take this question. Alex, you do a lot of stuff with maces. Can you read this? Can you see this?
This is the second time I've gotten this question recently. The reality is that I do very little with maces, so I would defer to Jim.
Yeah. No, I mean, I said, if you can handle it for 5 minutes unbroken, you can handle a heavier mace. But I also, going back to something I said on another show recently is, if you can get more out of your 10 kilogram, do it before you move up, right? So, if 5 minutes is good, why not try see if you can swing that thing for 10 minutes unbroken, 15 minutes unbroken, 20 minutes.
You might also consider, I mean, I guess it depends on what they're doing, but going slower is another option. Or doing like partials, like if there's a part of, let's say you're doing mace swings or casts or what have you, just like whatever part of it is tougher for you, try doing that for, say, a minute on end, and then 2 minutes, and then 3. And then by the time you're able to do it unbroken, it's going to feel way smoother. And when you bump up in weight, you will not be hamstringing yourself.
Yeah. And the whole point of working with things like maces it's this high skill thing to do, right? So really, really get every skill benefit you can on every weight.
Mm-hmm. Alex, did you work out today?
I did, actually. I'm in the home stretch for my SFG2 recertification, and I'm slightly behind on my pressing requirements because I packed on some manly beef over this past year or so. And so now I have to press a heavier bell. And and I made the typical, well, not typical, actually. I'm usually quite good with my training, but I hurt my shoulders like twice this year benching, which I will never do again.
Don't bench press.
You did it again? I remember you hurt yourself once. So you did it twice?
I did it, well, once in February and then once again before I came out and saw you in August. So that's probably at least one of the times that you're thinking of. But I mean, my shoulders have been a lot better, but I'm just behind on the pressing because I've had to kind of ease back in. But I'm doing a program right now. It seems to be working quite well. Just doing a lot of presses with the 28. Today I'm bumping up to the 32. But I did a rep max test. And at least on my right side, which is my pressing side, I've increased my rep max by 50% in a week. So
nice.
With a 28.
How heavy a bell do you have to press, Alex?
40.
40.
Yeah.
And have you had that before?
No, the 36 I can press without really too much of a problem or even a warm up, but like the 40 might as well just, when I tried it a couple of weeks ago, it was like, it did not feel like it was only 4 kilos more. It felt like it was quite a bit
I'm
more.
thinking of getting a 36 because, right now my max would be a 40 kg. Like when I was a larger person, I could do the 48, but I think that ship may have sailed. I'm not sure.
Well.
And we'll see. But I find like I really need that in betweener to work with. Like I can just go all day with a 32. And this used to not be the case. I don't know if it's an age thing or just being lighter now, but now I really feel like I need to get that 36 so I can start doing some decent singles.
Could be both. I mean, I remember reading a number of years ago. It was in Enter the Kettlebell. I think Pavel was talking about Steve Cotter could press the beast. I mean, and that guy was like, he's rather short and he's obviously like very slight. And so, but like Bud Bartlett, I think is a guy's name, and Donnie Thompson, they could press the beast and it's like, no problem. But the thing is, because they're so much bigger, they don't have to change their technique. Like they don't have to move off to the side a bit. That's what I have to do is I have to.
Yeah, it's so awkward. Technique. It's so awkward to have that thing racked.
So because now that you were a lighter gentleman, you might have to change the technique. So you might still have the potential for the strength, but because you don't have the same amount of mass, you're going to have to probably change your body position, I would bet.
What is your deadline, Alex? When do you have to complete that by?
Well, okay.
Later today.
Yeah, exactly. Right after this call. No, it
Any
was.
tips?
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna actually snort an entire container of ammonia, and that's my plan. No, but December 30th. But this I think is kind of dumb. So if there's anybody from Strong First listening, you should seriously consider what I'm saying. I logged in today or 2 days ago to look up, like some of the requirements, and they're like, make sure you have your videos done like in 2 weeks before the deadline. I'm like, well, then what's the point of having a deadline? Number one, if you're saying, oh, just kidding, 2 weeks before you've got to have your videos in. And it was like 10 days before that I was looking at it. So I reached out to a friend of mine who's a master instructor, and I was like, is this really going to matter? He's like, I don't think so, but I'll ask. And I was like, well, I've spent a lot of money with you guys for a long time, so I think
to be clear,
yes. No, I mean, I was obviously I didn't really say that, but the reality is, like,
well, you have
totally
now,
well,
yeah, exactly. Well, I have basically. The thing is, it's like got to be done by like the 30th of the month, so I should be just fine. But I thought like the deadline before the deadline thing was. I'm sure it's a formality. I doubt that it's anything all that serious, because otherwise there's no point in having a deadline. So yeah, technically on the 30th, I have to have it done, and I'm less concerned now. By the way, Brendan makes a really bold statement: the Kinks are better than the Beatles. Brendan, get out of here, man. Actually, I don't really care about the Beatles. I would say that Rolling Stones are better than the Beatles.
So I think Jim and Alex are going to be at odds here. First off, I'm not a Beatles fan at all. I've never liked the Beatles.
I'm not a huge fan. That's why I said I like the Stones much better than the Beatles.
Okay, here's the thing. I'm not a Beatles guy, and I think I'm not a Beatles guy because it just smacks to me so much of like self-indulgent baby boomer, man. Like I just, it's like every boomer thinks like art peaked, with the Sgt. Pepper album, right? And they've done nothing to outgrow that in any way, shape, or form, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I don't even think Paul McCartney takes it that seriously anymore, right?
Of course not.
So there are moments in the Beatles I like, but I've never been big on it. I think it's just that that smug boomer thing that Gen Xers had to grow up with, right?
Yeah, the thing is,
I
view them.
Here's my old man rant for the day there. Yeah.
Right. I view them as being like I remember actually a number of years ago I was in Vegas and I saw like a Cirque du Soleil show that was, oriented around Beatles music. And actually I thought like the music really complemented the show quite well. And so I enjoyed the music, but I would never sit down and be like, you know what? I really need to listen to some Beatles, but I'll totally put on like Rolling Stones. And incidentally, I think it's very funny because like the last surviving members of Beatles like to talk trash about the Stones. And it's like, dude, Mick Jagger is 78 years old and he's up there like
he's getting down, man.
Yeah, like he as if he were like 45 years younger. And it's just, like they are phenomenal. Not only is their music really good, but like they didn't quit decades ago. So you can't really like butt their chops.
Yeah.
That's right. Are you a Beatles fan, Levi?
I'll listen to the Beatles, but I think I'm going a whole different direction. I'm more in like the Gordon Lightfoot, Marty Robbins type category. I like the old folk type music.
There you go.
Yeah. I haven't listened to enough of the Kinks. I know them obviously, but neither of those bands have had strong appeal to me.
So, I've been playing around doing strict one-arm pressing last couple weeks, right? I forgot how much fun that is when done properly. Maybe I'll like see if I can get back to the beast. That would be interesting.
It's just one of those classic feel good lifts.
Yeah.
Just picking something up over your head, right?
Alex, maybe I'll talk to you about some strategery on doing that sometime.
Yeah, good. Well, we got to wrap this one up because we are.
I gotta go. Yeah,
got to get ready for the Christmas festivities. So, Alex, glad you could join us for the last couple of minutes, man. What a Christmas treat! Really appreciate
What a Christmas miracle that you guys finally, after all my months of trolling, whenever you do a live feed, you actually like invited me on.
I love that the crowning moment of our Christmas Eve show was an appearance by the Hebrew Hammer. Right.
Christmas miracle indeed.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. Good stuff, guys.
It's a big tent here in the Pat Flynn Show.
If you're not subscribed, we'll give Alex a couple plugs here. He deserves it. Check out his podcast. He's doing good work there over at the Hammercast. And dude, you have no right to complain, man. You've been on my show a million times. How many times have you had me on your show?
No, you've been on my show repeatedly. Like you're the guest who's been on the most.
When was I ever on your show, man?
Man, dude, I'm gonna send you a list. I've got it. I can put it right
Got
in my
the
phone
list
right
right
now.
here, buddy.
I've got a list in here. I've got binders full of times you've been on my show.
Had to be years ago, man. I do not remember this.
Yeah, it's been a little while actually, and I was thinking about that.
Guys,
because
I gotta
like,
bounce.
All right, we're
Yeah.
shutting
Merry
it down.
Christmas.
It's
Merry
over.
Christmas all.
It's over.
Merry
It's
Christmas.
over.